organizing your paperwork. We're going to go over the procedural safeguards again, and step by step the ARD process. So before we do that, one thing I wanted to ask is somebody had written in the chat box, and I apologize that we missed it on Wednesday, but this person had written, I think it's important for parents to know ahead of the evaluation, it's an all or nothing service. It's helped me personally to choose what evaluations I accepted my child to have through the school setting. Because if you don't agree to have one educational diagnosis, then you are declining the rest of the help. Parent cannot choose one if more than one educational diagnosis that has been given through the school. So I don't know, I don't recall who was it who mentioned that, but, and Leslie, did you want to comment on that? Because that may have been your experience, but you know, certainly we talked about the ability to disagree. And just because you deny one service doesn't mean that you don't get any services. So
yeah, I wasn't really clear on the point that they were trying to make. I know you really only need one label to be served.
Exactly. There's a 13 of them.
Right. And then under whatever label, I mean, some, like they did give my son autism and speech impairment, but at a very young age, I had mentioned that they did an IQ test that really wasn't valid because it was a verbal IQ test and he was nonverbal. And so that made me lose a lot of faith in having that test done. And I didn't want them to set the bar low on that, because really an IQ test is not valid for a typical child at such a young age. It's not a good prediction of outcome down the road. And so I never let them do another IQ test on my son when we did new evaluations. So you always have a choice in everything. And if, you know, if let's say you didn't want your child to have speech therapy, but they needed something else, you're right. I mean, if you wanted to do speech therapy only privately. So anyway, but if anybody has any other points, and it could be from district to district, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is parents always have a say. You have those procedural safeguards for a reason. And if they tell you something that doesn't sound right, you should definitely ask them to put that in writing and ask them to show you the federal or state law or policy that supports what they're telling you. Because a lot of times parents will call us and say, well, the school told me this. And then I'll find in the state regs or the federal law where that's not really correct. And I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I think sometimes some of the training doesn't filter down to each campus. So exactly. I don't think they're trying to do anything, you know, bad or anything. It's just sometimes they don't know.
Nancy, you had a question on that? You can go ahead and unmute
yourself.
Yes,
yes, I did. Going back to the IQ testing, my son, also nonverbal, did the IQ testing, didn't do well on it at all. Is there, since it's already done, is it possible to, I don't know, go back and revoke, or I don't know. So, because the bar was set very low for him.
I don't think that you can actually change any testing they've done, but like in my son's case, they used a verbal IQ test and he was nonverbal, and there are nonverbal tests, but they even said in the meeting, it's not a good prediction. And that doesn't mean he has an intellectual disability, because there are some children at a young age who would score very low on an IQ test just for the fact that maybe they hadn't had the same exposure or family life, or maybe a different language is involved. So I just wouldn't let that be a prediction of to come, because and you can always agree not to let them set the bar low. That was what they came out in that they didn't even put that label in the IEP because we already had the autism diagnosis and the speech delay. And so they even said that's not a good predicament and he's very young. And so we're not going to put that label on now. And and I think that is what should happen with any young child. It's, as far as IQ goes, because so at 3 or 5 years old, you're going to put a student on the path to not go to college right away. And then you're going to put them in life skills right away where they're not going to be exposed to the same curriculum and not going to have appropriate peer models. I mean, do they have a crystal ball on your child? Because I will tell you, I have seen kids who they thought were not going to do great things to go on to do great things, to go to college and or start a business or lots of great things. So I would just don't let them set the bar low for your child.
Nancy, hopefully that answered your question. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Yes, thank you.
And if you have any others, we're happy to answer. So next slide, please. So again, welcome. And just a couple of reminders, very safe place. No question is silly. No comment is ridiculous. It's your story and your journey. And Leslie and I are just here to help you and to answer any questions. We're going to review some of the things we went over in the other 2 sessions. We know there's a lot of information, so please know that you do not have to know everything. We don't expect that. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your comment, you can always private message myself or Leslie. Christina could not be with us today. If you speak Spanish and you're on this call, please send your message to one of the interpreters and they will go ahead and translate for Leslie and myself. And then everyone's muted, so we're good there. We hope to be finished by 1 o'clock. If we run a few minutes over, forgive us. We just don't want to make sure that we miss anything. And then as always, I send the slides and the recording to you. Please, please make sure you finish the survey. We still haven't gotten some of the survey responses from Monday and Wednesday, and I cannot tell you how important it is because we are grant funded. We don't know who is submitting the comments. So please, please make sure when I send you the slide and the recording that you do complete the survey. So keeping your documents organized, really important, and do what works for you. I used to have a folder and I used to just put the most recent on top. Some people use an accordion file, some people use a binder, but pick a system that works best for you. I cannot tell you how important it is to have these documents and to keep them organized, because the more organized you are, you can track the progress of your child. And if the ARD committee says, well, this wasn't the case, you can look in your records and say, no, wait a minute here. You may be getting my child mixed up with somebody else, but this is what happened. And these were the scores. And these were the progress notes and the report cards. If your child is seeing a therapist that is not from the school, make sure that you bring that as well and just keep it organized and bring it to all of your meetings. Again, when we were talking about the other day about being educated and being a part of the team, when you bring that information, people know that you mean business and you keep track of everything. So the procedural safeguards, the school district must, meaning by law, give you a copy of the procedural safeguards at least one time each school year. So typically the ARDs happen once a year, and sometimes you might have multiple ARDs. But just remember that you must be given that once a year. And within those procedural safeguards, it's on, I believe, page 2, prior written notice. So we talked about it the other day, but it bears repeating because you have a right to be given information in writing. Remember, if it's verbal, it doesn't count. It's what's documented, it's what's in writing. And this notice must be given to you at least 5 days in school. 5 school days in advance. So I can remember there was a time when we were supposed to have an ARD meeting, and the woman was overwhelmed, the chairperson, and she says, oh gosh, I think she called me on a Tuesday and said, can you meet on a Friday? Sure, no problem. So I waived that 5-day notice, and that's okay. But she had to ask me because it's supposed to be 5 school days in advance. So please make sure that you know about this, that you remember it. And if English is not your native language, make sure that it's in a manner that is easy to understand and in your native language. And I'll be honest with you, I work, as does Leslie, with a wide variety of ethnic populations. And we work a lot, I work a lot in the Muslim community. So the parent only speaks Farsi. Well, okay, school, find someone to translate it into Farsi. Otherwise, you're not going to get any response from the parent. Schools is going to think they're not being receptive or responsive. So it's really, really important that if you do not have English as your first language, tell the school. Trust me, they'll find a way to make sure they get it translated. And they must translate the notice orally and in a way that you can understand it. So we're going to name towards the end of this presentation some really great websites. But this is a really great video by Texas Project First, and it's in both English and Spanish. Feel free to pass it on. And it explains the special education process. It was written by parents for parents. Again, I will send you the slides. So you will be able to click on the link and watch this video. So the ARD process step by step. Leslie, if you want to take this slide, I can then resume after that.
Okay, so, and I know we've kind of already gone over this, but the evaluation or referral, anybody can refer a child for our special education evaluation. That's the first step, and that's the foundation of the IEP. So you have your evaluation, and then first they review any existing evaluation data, which is called the read. And remember, the read is not any new evaluation. Now it can be new data or new grades or new information, but it's not any new formal evaluation. But the read kind of helps you decide later down the road, is there any pieces missing, or do we need to reevaluate in a certain area? So the read is important. I just want you to make sure you understand that it is not any new formal evaluation. Sometimes we talk to parents and their child is a teenager, and if you look back in their paperwork, they thought they had a reevaluation, and over all those years in school, no new formal evaluation was done. And sometimes that could be a real problem, especially if progress is stagnant. They're going to give you your notice of rights, your procedural safeguards, which Judy just talked about, and you have to consent before they can do that. You have to consent for evaluations. And then you also have to consent if they will offer special education. So there's always parent consent. They shouldn't be doing anything without your consent. And then they're going to have the whole evaluation process. We talked about in the IDEA manual, they have a lot of good information about what your rights and what the students' rights are during the evaluation process. That's really good to look over. It's very parent friendly. And you'll be part of that process, because for a lot of the young kids, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions besides what they observe with your child. And then after the evaluation, of course, we talked about you getting copies of the reports ahead of time. So you're not sitting in there trying to go over that for the first time in the ARD meeting. And then you're going to have your ARD meeting, your admission review or dismissal meeting, or the IEP meeting. But you could have a planning conference first. I always like to do that. I like to get together with the teachers and maybe do planning, try to brainstorm and come up with good goals and objectives based on the evaluation ahead of time. That way we're not in a marathon ARD meeting and tying up teachers' times for hours and hours. We can kind of do a planning meeting after school or before school or on the teachers' break period. And you do want to be part of all this process. I know maybe you can't be part of everything, but even if they send stuff home, like we would send stuff back and forth. So they'd send me the draft IEP goals and I would highlight and maybe make changes or say, oh, I think we need a goal for this too, because remember, your child the best. And then at the ARD meeting, bring somebody with you. You probably don't need an advocate, but sometimes you might, if you get to the point where you can't come to some kind of agreement, or if you go in there, some parents are so overwhelmed, and I can see why they are, that they do want to bring an advocate from the beginning because they just don't feel comfortable sitting at that table by themselves and everything's so new to them. But it should be a collaborative effort. We should be working together with the school. Then once the ARD meeting is done, you're going to have everything in writing, and that is a legal document that they have to follow. So then there should be ongoing assessment. They're going to have benchmark tests that they do for each grade. You want to make sure that that's not checked as not needed in the IEP paperwork. Again, I just want to say you should know what's in every page of that IEP document. Different schools use different software for that. And in the school district that we were in, after each section, a little box was already pre-checked that I agreed with everything above that. So you have to really pay attention to that, because it's going to all be checked off. So if you don't agree to something, you have to let them know and talk about it and work it out. Ongoing assessment and data collection, IEP goals. So if you have a typical child and they're in school, your child is going to have homework, they're going to get homework grades, they're going to get test scores from tests they take spelling tests, vocabulary tests, whatever. And the teachers are going to record all those scores. And at the end of the 6 or 9 weeks, they're going to average those scores to give a typical student grades. Well, for the IEP goals, they have to be collecting data. Otherwise, it would be like the teacher never writing down any grades, and at the end of the 6 or 9 weeks saying, Johnny, I think I'll give him an 80. So progress on IEP goals should be based on data collection, just as regular report cards are based on homework scores and test scores. And then the last step, of course, will be you're going to have a yearly IEP meeting where you're going to look at all the new data and come up with any new recommendations, make changes to the goals and objectives, and see if there's any new assessment needed. You can request an ARD meeting if needed. So that is your right. Let's say you're going along and you feel like your child isn't making appropriate progress, or maybe they've made a lot of progress and they've already mastered the goals before the end of the year. You can always have an ARD meeting. You don't have to have an ARD meeting just to change goals now. You can do that outside of an ARD meeting if you want to, but if it's something really important, if there's a behavioral issue or just something very important that needs to be addressed, you can request an ARD meeting. Of course, do that in writing. Again, I really like the IDEA manual that we gave you the link for, because it has sample letters that help you. You can do it through email if you like, but you want to have documentation of that. And again, Texas Project First is a great website to learn more about each of these steps. If you go there and click on the blue letters, it'll be on this page and it'll go into detail about each step of the IEP process.
Thank you, Leslie. And
this is just a visual, just to show how the evaluation and data collection are the foundation, and then you have your present levels, goals and objectives, supplementary aids and services like speech therapy, OT, maybe your child has in-class support, and then placement. And that's kind of how the ARD agenda should go. And that's on that Texas Project page, Texas Project First page.
So this is really important as well. If your family that you're working with, or if you're a parent, please remember that the disability, it's just one part of your child. That doesn't define their success. It doesn't define what they're going to do in the future. It's just a part of who they are. It's a passport to services. That's all that disability label is. Make sure that the teachers, the therapists, the guidance counselor, if you're involved with them, that they know your child's strengths, their challenges. If they love to read but have trouble understanding what the story is about, let them know that, so they can ask those open-ended questions so that your child can understand what's happening in a story. Tell them about your child's interests, their hobbies, so they can get to know them better. It's a way to engage your child, to build that relationship, to build that trust. Leslie and I get asked all the time, what is the best school district to send your child to? To which I always say, there is no such thing. It's how the teacher connects with your child. And can they make that connection? Does your child have certain fears? Loud noises, bright lights. My son, terrified of thunderstorms. So clearly we are in the wrong climate. And are there certain foods that your child doesn't like, or what they do like? My son has a very strong sense of smell. So he'll eat cheese, but you would never see him eating cheese like blue cheese because that's too strong of a smell. So let the people know that are working with your child, because that can only strengthen the relationship. And then what I always did was that after my son was in their class, I would shoot them an email and say, I realize you've got so many students you're working with. My child is just one. Could I meet with you at your convenience just to share with you basically what makes my child tick and what his maybe fears or challenges are? This really helps in working with your child, and to me, it is a huge benefit. And a one-page profile can happen when you're a child, student, an adult. It really can be helpful to anyone who interacts with your loved one.
If you go on Texas Project First, and in the top right-hand corner, there's a search button there. And if you search student portfolios, they give you lots of great ideas. For that, it can be fancy or it can be just a one-page profile. I just did a one-page profile for Cameron, what works for Cameron. You know, he said words that other people wouldn't understand. That was important for them to know. It was important for them to know he was on a dairy-free diet. So please don't give him dairy because it affects his behavior and causes eczema. It let them know that he had to be warned in advance if there was going to be a fire drill because he had a hard time with transitions, just little things like that. And they were so appreciative to know about these things. So they didn't, have to deal with meltdowns that could be prevented.
So great question. Her son is already in school. Is it too late for a one-page profile? Not at all. Not at all. What you might want to do is write it up and then share it with them either before winter break or after winter break. But no, it is never too late. Never too late at all. And the more information teachers, therapists have, they can work with your child, and that only strengthens the relationship and the benefits. So yeah, it's never too late. I'm so glad you asked that. So who would you present it to? What you might want to do is, it depends on the relationship with your teachers. Sometimes you might want to email it to them. Sometimes you might want to ask for a conference. It depends on your schedule as well. A lot of parents are working these days and they don't have time to meet during school hours. But if you do, what I used to say is, okay, teachers, when you have your planning period, can I stop by for about 30 minutes? And can I discuss this one-page profile with you that I've already emailed to you so that you can ask questions and you can get to know my child better? If you don't have time, say you always work an 8 to 5 job and you don't have time to do that, email it to them and then say, could I speak with you in the evening one evening? Or can I speak with you on the weekend? Teachers get that there are plenty of working parents in this world, and they'll usually make time for a phone call for you, or even if it's a back and forth email exchange. You just want to make sure that they've read it so that they know your child better. So choose a method that works best for you and that works with the teachers as well.
Yeah, I always would ask them to attach it to the ARD document also. I had friends that would do like a binder, like I have some friends who had children with a lot of medical needs, and they would do a binder and have them have on the front page, it would list everybody at the school they wanted to look at the binder, and had a place their name and then to check off that they had read it, because their child had some very high medical needs that everybody needed to know about. So you can do it a lot of different ways. Just figure out what works best for you. And then if it's, I would ask, at the beginning of every school year, at least while your children are young, you usually have a parent-teacher conference. So I'd bring it with you there and ask them, have you read it if you had sent it some other way?
Definitely. And if your child does have a lot of medical needs, give it to their specialists. They need to know how to interact with your child. Very, very important. Give it to the pediatrician. so that the nurse can look at it and it can be uploaded into the portal and they can see what works best. Because all of these people helping you help your child need to be informed. As far as the special education process goes, we've talked about it before, Texas Project First. It's in both English and Spanish. There's a search bar at the top. It goes by age, or you can just put in what you're looking for. Really helpful resource. I think that there's a lot of great information on the internet, but what's important to know is not everything that you read on the internet is accurate. Texas Project First is the real deal, and you won't be misinformed. If you're on this call and you work with children or have a child that is birth to 5 years old, wonderful website, parentcompanion.org, also in both English and Spanish.
Sorry.
No worries. So if you think, gosh, this doesn't sound right what I'm being told, or you're thinking, now, I know I can get this, or the school says it's this way and I'm not sure, you can actually talk to a real live person. If you go to spedtex.org, they give you the phone number, ways to email them, and you can call them. One thing that we do suggest is anything that they do tell you, I would put it in the chat box so that you have record of it. And spedtex.org, it's open during school hours, and they are typically former school administration people, but they're going to tell you what the law is. So if you're not sure about something that the school is telling you, or you wonder, gee, maybe I am not being reasonable, and let me check this out, spedtex.org is a good group to reach out to. But just make sure you document and you have what they have told you. This is one of my favorite websites as well, Navigate Life Texas. And we all know how diverse Houston is. And it is, there's languages I never even thought I knew of, but sure enough, Navigate Life Texas, you can translate into every language imaginable. So there I put English and Spanish, and I put Chinese, I think. And then I think I also put either Hindi or Farsi. I can't remember which one I chose. But it is a fabulous website that talks about all of the different life cycles, the law, it talks about Medicaid waivers, it talks about the school process. Really terrific website. We encourage you to take a look at it. It talks about transition and guardianship, working with your doctors. Great information. So some final reminders. Please, please remember that you are not alone. If you need us, we are here. It may take us a little time to get back to you because we are what I call tiny but mighty. We are a small nonprofit, and it sometimes takes us maybe a few days to get back to you, but just remember that you're not alone. We're here to help. We don't claim to know exactly how your families feel or how you feel, but we might have a pretty good idea because our kids are adults, so we've gone through quite a bit on our journey. We talked briefly about the Medicaid waivers, and it's really important that you sign up for them. If you are on this call and you are a millionaire or your loved one has a trust fund, excuse me, I take that back. If you are a millionaire, your income is not considered when your child's name comes up for the waivers. Remember, those waivers provide long-term services and support because we don't want your loved one ending up in an institution. So if you live in Harris County, you contact the Harris Center. If you live in Fort Bend County, you contact Texana. And it's a simple phone call and you just say, I want to sign my child up for the waiver interest list. I think you give your name, date of birth for your child, the address and phone number. And then they'll call you every couple of years. And if they don't, you need to make sure that you call them. And then I urge you to go to Navigate Life Texas and just put in the search Medicaid waivers, because there's a phone number that you need to call in Austin. It's an 877 number. And you want to make sure that your loved one is registered for the CLASS program. Again, another program that provides long-term services and supports. If there's one thing that we taught you, we want to make sure that your loved one is signed up on the waivers. Maybe right now they're saying that your child is speech impaired, but that may turn into an autism diagnosis. It may turn into something else. Get them on the list now, because the waiting list is 12 to 15 years long. It's ridiculous, but it is what it is in Texas.
And I was going to say too, you can be on all the waiting list, so if you read the description of the waiver and you feel like it might apply to your child, get them on all those waiting lists. When your name comes up, if you don't need it, you just say no, thank you. There are ways to not wait. Some of the waivers have a shorter wait period than others. I would definitely take whichever waiver you come up on first and keep your name on the other waiting list. And then if they come up on another waiver, you can compare at that time and decide which one's the best one for your child. If you get in a crisis, there is a crisis diversion slot, a way to get the waiver sooner than 15 years if you're in some type of crisis. Also, if you have a child that meets certain medical criteria, there is something called Rider 28, where you go with them and stay in a nursing home overnight, but that's for somebody who has really, really high medical needs. So those are some little things to know about. If you need information about that, please contact me and I can provide you with that information. If your child has regular Medicaid insurance, make sure you look up personal assistance services through Medicaid. Also, if your child is still on the waiting list at age 18, there's something called Community First Choice, which is not a waiver, but it's some of the services while you're still on the waiting list. Because when your child turns 18, they're an adult and they may be eligible for SSI and Medicaid. So lots of things to know about. I know for a lot of you, that's a long ways off, but I just like to mention them. So when you get close to that, you think about that and say, oh, my child's getting close to 18. I better call Family to Family because I have all that information. We have it in our database that we can give to you so you know how to navigate, because just when you think you've got everything figured out, you get into a new phase of life and there's so much more to learn. So
much. So keep in touch with us. We are on Facebook, like Family to Family Network, and we share great information. It could be important legislation that applies to you and your family. It could be sensory-friendly events, which are really popular this time of year. And it could be classes that we have, free classes. So make sure that you like us on Facebook. I'm also personally on, and I would love to be your friend. So please make sure that you, I'm just listed as Judy Blake. And if you send me a friend request, I'd be thrilled to have you as part of my group.
if you guys like to do Facebook too, if you search your school district or your area or even some of their areas, there's some great private Facebook groups for parents who have kids with disabilities. And it's a great way to network with other parents who are going through the same thing. Know that everybody's going to have different opinions about everything, and everything you read on there is not necessarily correct, but I find a lot of good information to help parents on there and to help my son, just like, oh, I need a new primary care provider that takes Medicaid. Does anybody have one in the Cypress area that they like? Things like that. Or just any new information. Oh, did you know that Medicaid is going to start covering ABA therapy in February? But you learn a lot from those, from other parents. You're going to learn a lot of really good information from other parents.
No one ever rises to low expectations. Your child can achieve so much. They just may take a little longer to get there. They may need some modifications. They may need accommodations, but they can do so much. So don't let anyone sell your loved one short, because the last chapter has not been written, and everyone deserves chances. Everyone deserves opportunities. Everyone deserves what I call a meaningful life. And meaningful life does not mean sitting on the living room couch, playing video games, being isolated, watching TV all day. It's in the community, it's at family events, it's at community events. And there's so much out there that your child can be a part of.
Hey, Judy, is the next slide, it has the survey, is that the correct?
I think
survey?
so, which we're going to skip over.
Okay, can I share right now, since you're talking
Absolutely.
about your child
Absolutely.
achieving so much? So bear with me because I'm sharing my screen. And I will come back to this if I can do it.
While Leslie's doing that, any questions, thoughts? And I put in the chat box the survey link, and I will repeat it again. We need to get more surveys, everyone, please, 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 because that's how we get our funding, is because they want to know feedback. So please, please, when I send you the link for the recording and the slides, please, please make sure that you take the survey as well. It's just a few questions. Okay, Leslie, did you find, there you go.
Yeah, so I like to hopefully inspire parents to, you know, like Judy said, set the bar high. I wanted to get to the, maybe it's down here. Sometimes I can't see my whole screen.
Yeah,
but,
no, I understand. But go ahead, Leslie.
But I encourage you to go to this website. It's Shredding on the Go. Oh, here we go. I didn't realize it was down here. So this website is James Parker, and they have a little video by his parents, but James has multiple disabilities. He uses a wheelchair. He uses a communication device. He has limited arm movement, but has some. But James, his parents had very high expectations, and with the help of the school district, his therapies, Texas Workforce Commission, he now owns his own company called Shredding on the Go. He employs other people, that's James. He employs other people with disabilities to shred too, and he just has a really full life. And I can even share many more stories like this with you of people with disabilities who have gone to college or gone to community college. We honored one young man, Blake, who had gone to a college in New Mexico at our last annual fundraiser, and it was a college program for students. He has Down syndrome with intellectual disabilities, and he went there, came back, got a job, lives in an apartment with the help of his waiver and his parents, and he works. And let's see, there's another young man that loves to go garage sailing and collects teacups and saucers and makes bird feeders out of them. Another man has his garden and he grows peppers and he makes sweet heat jam. So everybody can do something. And I just want you to be inspired by this.
And when you're having those ARD meetings, I mean, I realize, many of you on this call work with young children, but when you start to have elective classes, or there's clubs that your child or family can be a part of, see what interests your child. And the IEP, those elective classes, should be built around those interests. So for example, my son was, yeah, that's not the right slide, Leslie.
Okay.
Yeah, my son was interested in food service. So he took this great, like a home ec class, and the teacher was amazing. And then he worked in a school cafeteria for 3 years. And then we learned when he did an internship in an office setting that he likes that kind of setting. So now he does a typing program and he's up to 51 words a minute, which is really great.
Oh.
So I'm working on getting him a job with a job coach. So because he can collate packets, he can do data entry, he knows basic Microsoft Excel skills. But that's what the purpose of those ARD and IEPs are, those meetings, is to prepare them for college and employment and independent living, whatever pattern that falls in. But it's important that you have that plan. And that's why we're having these classes, so that you know how to prepare, you know how to plan. And if the school isn't sure, because it's impossible to know everything, you can guide them as well. Leslie, if you want to stop sharing your screen.
Okay.